Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. This is Sean. Hopefully my screen is coming across. Matt, is that showing up okay?
Yep. We can see your screen just fine.
Perfect. Thanks everyone for joining. Really excited for this release. There is just a ton of new capability. I think when you see the release notes, it's going to be really impressive. I think it's over 37 pages of release notes. Some huge features that Matt and Hannah are going to walk through today, including fiscal periods, BPA Flatgrid version 2.0 with tons of new capabilities. But what I wanted to do is start today's discussion and presentation with another new feature that I'm really excited about. It's called Scribe. Now, the reason we're introducing this feature, and I'm going to walk you through some slides here, and then Matt will take you through things in more detail. But one thing we've been missing in the product since really its inception has been, how do we memorialize decisions? So when you're working through your resource forecasting and planning and all of the work you're doing in Tempus today, clearly there are a number of decisions being made. And those decisions could be on not just the resourcing side, but on financials, on milestones, on schedules, resource requests, on attributes. And while we do have the untamperable or tamper-proof audit log, we haven't had a way to capture the decisions you've made. Why did you put somebody where you put them? Why did you extend the project? Why did you change these attributes? Why did you alter the milestone information? Really key information that, and when we've polled clients, really haven't gotten much consistency on where that information was going. It might be in Excel files, in SharePoint, in various documents. It could just be in emails. But obviously none of those are really suitable. And because of that, we've decided, and launching with 7.2, a feature called Scribe, where you can memorialize and capture all of those key decisions that you're making when using Tempus. And you'll see there's a ton of functionality here in 7.2, and we're going to invest in even more in future releases to really help share that information more broadly across the organization. So think of this as a decision management capability now built directly into Tempus. Now, Matt, again, will show you more, but I'll take you through the high level of the product or high level features of Scribe. The first thing you'll notice is that inside of your project with rights, there are some security settings around this. You'll now have a new icon, and it looks like a little chat window, and it'll be hidden by default. When selected, it will pop out on the right side of the screen. And inside of that window, you'll have a host of options and features available to you. First, you can hide and then open the Scribe window using the little buttons at the top. You'll see your history of all those decisions made over the entire life of the project, of the audit, of the program, however you're using Tempus. You'll be able to craft new messages. You can format those messages. You'll see a range of formatting options here above the Scribe window. You can obviously input information here. You can make these decisions and messages private so that only you can see them, and maybe then make them available to others when you wish. You can use mentions, so you can actually mention others that are part of Tempus. And there's additional capabilities and functionality that I'll show you in a moment around that feature set. And you can also use tags, both the tagging as well as a star feature, where you can essentially star a message as being a key decision, will play a role when we roll up all of our Scribe information globally. So right now I'm inside of a single project. I'm on maybe the financials tab or the allocation tab. I input my Scribe message and save it, and it's now saved indefinitely and available for audits, retrospectives, whatever, however you're managing these decisions internally or however you will, directly inside of Tempus. Super simple and easy to use. You can also go back and edit these messages or delete them if necessary, and those are the messages you've created. So again, there's some security around this as well to prevent accidental deletion or tampering around these decisions. You also have the ability here to insert screen captures. So not only can you capture messaging and format that information, but you could also pop in a screen capture. So if you've decided to take some action based on some other information that might be best expressed in a screen capture, that's fully supported. And you can see inside of these messages, you have the ability to sort of star or unstar them. And the idea there is that you're tagging them. You're basically saying that, or excuse me, pinning it, saying this is a key decision amongst all the decisions that I've captured inside of Scribe. You can also edit these decisions. You can delete them, obviously, with security. And you'll also notice in the top here that this scribe window will open and show just the messages or decisions that were input in that particular screen. What does that mean? So if I'm on the allocations tab in my project and I input a decision in Scribe, it is only going to show me the decisions or Scribe messages set in the allocations tab. However, if I wanted to, and that's a default filter setting, if you wanted to, you could change that setting to now show you, well, I want to see the decisions and Scribe messages that were made on milestones, on resource requests, on financials, while I'm evaluating and inputting a new decision underneath the allocations tab. So there's a ton of flexibility here in how you can view and filter these messages inside of a project and then later globally. You'll also find options here to filter for only private messages, as well as those starred or unstarred messages as well. Other capabilities. So as you'd expect, when these Scribe decisions and messages are input, Tempus is capturing all at every point, and also historically, the user identity, so who input this decision. And of course, if you're using images, you'll see that as well as the date time. And then perhaps most importantly, when you're in the project, where was the message or decision input? Is it in context of financials, in context of allocations, in context of milestones? And this is an example of where we can essentially show decisions made in any one of those project subscreens in a single window, or we can filter them as necessary. So very valuable information available for all time throughout that project's lifecycle. Another really key and critical capability here, we do support mentions. So if you wanted to mention a colleague or somebody else in Tempus, does have to be a user in Tempus, we do support the @mention feature, as you're seeing here on the screen. And then we've extended this. So now in Tempus from the homepage, or really anywhere you navigate, you will now see this little bell icon. This bell icon facilitates in-app alerting and in-app messaging. So where you are the party who has been mentioned, you will now have a little indicator on top of the bell. When you click on that bell, you will see all of those mentions where you have been included. These are clickable. You can hover over to get more detail or click on any one of these to then take you into that particular project, that particular tab of the project or sub-entity, and that particular Scribe message. So very powerful capability. In a future release, very soon actually, this will tie into other third-party tooling for messaging and alerting. And we could talk more about that at another time, but really exciting things going on to support the extension of Scribe, your collaboration and communications capabilities directly inside of Tempus. Now, we've looked at Scribe inside of individual projects, or we've talked about it, and now we've talked about this sort of global in-app alerting for mentions, but what about and how do we holistically roll up all of our key decisions across Tempus, maybe within a particular portfolio, region, location, or maybe just in one project, I want to see everything. Well, again, to handle that, from the homepage, you now have a new tile, if granted access, called Scribe Rollup. The intent here is to give you a global view with security into all of these decisions that have been made across your projects, portfolios, audits, programs, however you are using Tempus today. When you drill into Scribe Rollup, you will see who input the message or the decision, when was it created, is it private or not, the project it's associated to, which section of the project, financials, allocations, milestones, workflow, is it starred as a key decision, are there any tags, and then what is the full message. There's filtering here by resource attribution. We can insert various columns, we can group by, and also filter over various timeframes. So again, very powerful capabilities for communications and collaboration inside of individual projects using the mentions, and then globally using this Scribe rollup. So that's Scribe in a nutshell. Matt's going to take you through all of 7.2 today. If there's additional questions, please save those to the end. And if you wanted a separate session to discuss Scribe, we're happy to facilitate it. So very, very excited to bring this to our customer base and hope you enjoy it. So with that, I will stop sharing and hand things back to Matt.
Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and start off within 7.2, going through some of the main key pieces of functionality. And the first thing that we'll be kind of walking through very briefly is just a continuation onto what Sean was going over, which was Scribe, and how you can interact with that within Tempus. So first thing that you will notice when you log into Tempus is you do now have this notification icon in the top right, just showing you all those different notifications that have been associated to your account. So whenever you're mentioned within one of those decisions that you'd be walking through at that project level, you will get a notification. All these have been addressed and been reviewed already, but if it is a new notification, you would see an icon above the bell icon here, just showing you that there has something that has not been addressed. And to navigate to Scribe, what we can do is just navigate to project management, and I'm going to go ahead and open up a random project. So initially by default, this is going to be closed. However, since I had it open last time I opened a project, it was automatically open, but you will now notice for any of your particular project screens, you will have this kind of icon, which when you open it will bring up Scribe and showing you any of the decisions that were associated to the project, as well as anything that you could see on that particular screen. So down below, you can see kind of this is where you're going to be entering in those particular decisions. So you can just say I updated the project dependencies of the given project. You can go ahead and put that in there. And then I can go ahead and just save that to there, and then you can see that it's been added. Outside of that, you have some formatting options if you want to bold, italicize, or strike through, as well as you can change the font background color, as well as you can change the font color, as well as the alignment. So some very basic kind of text options if you want to customize what that looks like. Additionally, down below, you do also have options to set that as private, meaning it's going to be a decision or any message that you associate to the project that only that user can see. So other users will not be able to see your private messages. It's just there to kind of keep maybe a particular note, something maybe you have to go back to at some point in time, or just something you want to remember that doesn't need to be broadcast to any of the other users that have access to Scribe within Tempus. Additionally, you can add tags. So if you want to tag this and help group some of those decisions based off of maybe if it's a risk, it's a particular type of decision, or it's a group of users that would be working towards that, you can tag these. So that way on the Scribe rollup, you would then be able to very easily filter by those particular tags that have been added. And then from there, help see kind of a high level overview of all those types of decisions that may need to be made. And then additionally, the last thing that Sean had mentioned was the mention capability. And this is just going to allow you to mention a particular user in Tempus. That way they are notified that this is someone that they mentioned them in that particular decision, notifying the user that they may need to navigate to the project and see what was said. So you can either, for this particular option, you can either select this add option and it will bring in the @ sign, or you can simply just type @ and it'll do the same thing. You'll get that drop-down list of users. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and just select my account. And I'm just going to say, please review the security group of the project. And once you enter that in, you can see up above now, we have this red circle icon showing that there's a new notification associated to my account. And if I were to go to the home page or any other page in Tempus, let's say I went to roadmap management, and see that I have that notification, it's going to say I was mentioned on this particular project on the attributes page. I can go ahead and click on there and it will navigate me directly to that particular project on the attribute screen. So the notifications do help you kind of navigate through the system and can very easily bring you to the page where you may have to take some sort of action or make some sort of decision within there. Okay. Additionally, you do have some more options as well. So if you ever want to edit or delete an existing message, you can do so by selecting on the message here. As long as you're the owner, you can go ahead, you have the option to star it, making it the high importance message or decision that is being made. You can edit what is being said within here. So if there's a typo or something that needs to be essentially altered, but still pertains to the project, you can go ahead and edit that if needed. And then lastly, if the message is no longer relevant to that particular project, you can delete that as well. You will see that we do have the particular user that has submitted or wrote the decision, as well as you can see the page that is associated to. And then up here at the top, you do have some filtering options to help you determine, do I want to show only my private messages? Do I want to show my starred messages? As well as what particular project screens do I want to bring in when we're reviewing this information. So by default, it's going to be showing all messages associated to that screen. However, if you wanted to look at multiple screens, so maybe you want to see all the messages on the allocations as well as on the build team, and on top of that, the attributes, you can do so. And then all those messages would be displayed, and you'd also see what screen they were added on in the top right-hand corner here. So that's a very brief run through of how to use Scribe and make those decisions and associate them to the projects. The last piece of Scribe that you do also have access to is the Scribe rollup, which is that kind of area where you can report off of some of the decisions that have been made and kind of get that overall listing of what has been decided on the project. So if you do have access to Scribe, you will see the Scribe rollup page on the home page. And we can go ahead and select on that tile. And here you're going to see all of those different decisions that have been associated to your projects. You can see the resource that made them, when it was created, if it's a private message, the project is associated to, as well as the section, and then also any tags associated to it, as well as if it's been starred. And then lastly, the message itself. So you can go ahead, work with any of these, drill into them to navigate to the resource in this case. Maybe you want to go to the project or that particular project tab itself. You can do all of that and quickly navigate to those particular sections or of Tempus based off of the messages within here. Additionally, you have some options to filter this information by a particular date range. So maybe you only wanted to view any decisions that were made or messages that were associated to the project from 1/9/2023 to maybe 1/13. We can go ahead, apply that filter, have this information display, and filter out maybe some of those less relevant messages that were associated to the projects. You can also have grouping options based off of when it was created on, the project name, as well as the resources. You have the ability to manipulate the columns that are being displayed. And then lastly, you have some additional filtering options, determining if you want to show the top X amount, either 100, 500, 1,000, if you only want to show private or starred messages, if there's a particular section that you're focused on. So maybe you only want to see decisions that had to be made on allocation, attributes, or schedule. We can go ahead and put that filter to only show those messages. You can select particular resources, and then you can also say the projects and tags based off of how you want this information displayed. So once you've had that set up, the last thing that you do have the option to do is you can export this to a CSV. So if you do need to export these comments and take them offline or review them with someone else in the organization, you can easily do so by selecting on the export option up here and selecting on CSV. So that is a brief run through of the Scribe, like Sean's Scribe functionality in Tempus. Like Sean was saying, it's very powerful functionality. It allows for that some of that collaboration and help make some decisions associated to the project. So outside of that, we do have a plethora of additional functionality that has been added. And the first area that we're going to start within here will be the project management area within Tempus. And I'm going to go ahead and open up one of the projects. And what we will notice, even if we close over Scribe, is there has been some tweaks to the user interface within here. So we have been making some minor tweaks here and there to the user interface to make it more modernized and make it a little bit cleaner. So we continue to do so, and you can see kind of some of those changes within here. And one of the major ones being kind of how you navigate throughout the different screens associated to a project. So we have just consolidated this into a singular dropdown, showing the attributes allocation, as well as any of the other project tabs associated to your project. This is still going to be based off of the permissions associated to your account. So if the users don't have access to maybe the audit log or build team, they won't have those options available within the dropdown. But just a slightly different way of this information being displayed. Instead of the allocations and attributes areas being determined and displayed as tabs before, now it's going to be one singular dropdown. So if we navigate to the single or the allocations tab and go to the single project allocation screen, you will also notice that the grid looks slightly different, just a little bit more cleaner version of the previous grid. The functionality is going to be remain very similar to what we saw with a couple enhancements. However, some of the changes to the look and feel, as well as some of the drop downs, will be displayed within here. And the first one I want to mention is kind of the allocation and demand. So previously these were tabs side by side. However, we have made this to a drop down, as well as slightly changed the position of the planned actual and planned actual remaining. So the data unit that is associated to here has just been shifted over to the left. Additionally, the grid has been modernized down below, so it's going to more so mirror some of the more modern grids that you'll see throughout Tempus now. So we had to change a couple things around on the user interface. First one being this kind of group by option. So before you had options to say you wanted to group by your resource or your tasks, and they were tabs side by side. However, now it's going to be a drop down where you can select resource or tab. Additionally, we have added some options on giving the users capability to reorder the resources within a single project allocation screen. So this was functionality that was in Tempus at one point in time, has since been removed, but we've added it back. So if I were to group by my resources, you will see these options to the left, the 6-dot icon, which allows you to kind of move and change the ordering of the resources being displayed, as well as that will persist. So if you want to manually change the ordering based on how this information should be displayed, you can do so and have that persist on the project. Okay, additionally, we have updated milestones very, very slightly within basically all views within Tempus. So you have your milestones, and if you're familiar with the milestones within Tempus, they're displayed in many different views. You'll see them in bulk project allocation Flatgrid, the Gantt views, roadmap. Basically, any view that is displaying some sort of project information, you most likely can see the milestones. And what we have added is the ability to kind of essentially automatically navigate to that milestone page of a project by just directly clicking on them. So if we wanted to navigate to the project Astro Phase 7's milestones, we can just click on this milestone. It will open up a new tab on that particular project's milestone screen. So probably not something that is that impactful when I'm literally just going from one page, and I could do the same thing by selecting within here, but a lot more impactful if you're on the project Gantt view or BPA Flatgrid, which you can just very quickly navigate directly to the project to see the milestones and ensure that everything's lining up as expected. Okay, and then the last update that we will see within the single project allocation screen is in the resource replace area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to one of my resources once the project has been checked out. And I'm going to go ahead and select on the ellipses right here and just select on the resource replace option. So one of the new pieces of functionality we've added in here is this redistribute option associated to the resources. So in previous iterations, you would go through here, see that it's assigned to the resource, select the resources for which would be taking on those hours. And let's say it was Mark N, as well as we'll select Beverly here. And then you'd go through here and say how many hours do you want to have assigned, maybe 20 here, and then 60 here, and then you'd have to either redistribute this way and make sure those hours line up. However, we added this redistribute option, which is going to equally redistribute all the hours assigned between the 3 resources in this case, or as many resources that you have selected within here. So in this case, we have 3 resources. If I hit redistribute, we should expect to see around 33.33 hours per resource, equally distributed. If I were to add more, let's say I had 5 and I want to redistribute, it's going to take the initially requested hours and then equally redistribute it out. So we're seeing the 20 and 20 hours being assigned to all the resources. So just a new option to very quickly redistribute all the hours equally to the resources that you have selected. And then the last option that we have updated within here is we have added a quarter mode. You'll see that throughout a lot of different views that we have, as well as that we've added this option to view this information at a quarter level. So previously it was at a daily, weekly, and monthly level. Now you'll see the quarterly, as well as some of the fiscal month and quarter options, which we'll be covering in a little bit more in depth in just a moment. So if you want to do your resource replace at a quarter level, we can go ahead and select that, and then the information will display accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead and just replace this option, hit replace. We see those updates take place in the project, and I'm just going to go ahead and save and check in. So some additional minor updates within the project area as well is, first, if we go to the bulk or the build team screen, you will see that updated user interface, more so similar to the existing grid. So down below, this grid is going to be slightly different than you've seen before, just a little bit more modernized, but the functionality within here is going to remain the same. However, we have added some of those same fiscal options, so fiscal month and quarter within here. And on top of that, we also added the quarter option to have this information displayed at a quarterly level. Additionally, a very small change in what we've done is I'm going to add some resources onto my team and save it. And what we have done is we have introduced a new icon within here to denote resources that are assigned to the project. So previously, if the resource was assigned to the project as well as on the build team, you'd see an asterisk next to the name, which meant essentially that they're assigned to the project as well as on the build team. However, we have changed that icon to be a little bit more straightforward. We have a person with the shield, and if you hover over it, it is going to say that that resource has been assigned to the project. So just a little bit more clarity as to why they may not be able to be removed from the particular build team after they have been assigned. Okay, so moving on, we've also have some changes to financials. Again, some slightly small changes, but changes nonetheless. One is, again, the same user interface updates that we've seen throughout these other screens, as well as we've added some sorting capabilities within here. So if we were to add some of our financial categories within here, they're still going to be grouped, and let me add one more. They're still going to be grouped by if they're positive or if they're negative. However, if you wanted to sort by that, we can always select on the name, and it will sort that in ascending or descending order based on how you select it. So you do have those sorting options as well. So I'm going to release those changes. And then the last change that we made on the project side of things is if we go to Sheets, and within here, we have introduced the ability to add rows at any point within the sheet instead of just at the bottom. So in previous iterations, we would have, by default, have 1,000 rows available within the sheet, but then we would allow users to add additional rows. However, those rows would always be added at the bottom of the sheet. And what we've done is we've given the user the capability to determine where they want those rows to be added based off of what cell they've selected. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some values in here. And let's say we need to add some additional rows after row 4 here. So where it says risk name of test 3. What we can do is we can just select on that cell, and then up here, we have the ability to add additional rows. And let's say I needed to add 5, and then I can hit the plus icon. So since I was hovered over and selected into row 4, it's going to add those additional rows right below that. In previous iterations, it would have just added those to the bottom of the sheet. So that covers the additional functionality on the project side of things. I'm going to head back one screen, and we have added some additional functionality on the project Gantt view as well. So over the course of from 7.0 to around 7.2 where we're at now, we have been increasing and updating the functionality that is available within these screens, some of them being the ability to see milestones within the project Gantt view, as well as the ability to see project dependencies. So we introduced this functionality. However, they were always being displayed. So we have given the user the ability to kind of toggle if they want to show those dependencies or milestones. So up here, they will have this options button right here, which will just allow them to toggle if they want to see this information or if they want to hide it. So completely up to them, as well as something I mentioned earlier that you can see within here as well, is if you do see those project milestones, you can select on them and navigate directly to that project to get more information on them. So that's something that we'll continue to see with some of the other views, but I just want to make sure We do mention them when they come up to show that you can navigate to that milestone screen from many of the different views within Tempus. Okay, so that concludes kind of the project management area and the enhancements within there. The next area that we're going to be covering is more so on the bulk project allocation Flatgrid side of things. Okay, so from the home page, we can go to bulk project allocation Flatgrid, and by default right here, you can already see that there's been a good amount of changes that have happened, especially around the look and feel. So just so we can start out fresh, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new view and go here and start from the beginning. So the functionality within here is going to be very similar to how you've used bulk project allocation Flatgrid in the past. It's still a screen for users to be able to navigate to and update multiple resources and projects simultaneously, either the planned or actual allocation or demand within here. It's just an updated view with additional capabilities added to it. And the first thing, like you typically would do if you're starting out on BPA Flatgrid, would be for the user to provide a start and end date. So what you could do is you can navigate here where it says start date, and then go ahead and provide the dates that you want to essentially report off of and display within the grid. But we've also added a date filtering type of option to automatically populate some of the dates. So something that we've heard from many of our clients is they want the capability to kind of say, oh, I just want this quarter or this current year, and they don't want to have to continuously update the or essentially provide the dates. So we've added some of these dynamic filter options where they can essentially say, I just want to see the current year, and it's going to automatically provide the start and end date of the current year. We could do current quarter, next quarter, and select those options, and then they would the date range would be updated within here. So I'm going to go ahead, select the option once more, select current year, and just display information from for 2023. And then from there, you could select the data set you want to work with, planned, actual, or both of them, very similar to what we saw in the previous versions, as well as allocation or demand. But we also introduced the ability to display both of them within this grid. So previously, this functionality was only available in the original BPA grid. However, we have added and introduced it within bulk project allocation Flatgrid as well. So I'm going to stick with allocation in this case. And then next, the first change you will notice is how you select your resources. So previously you had kind of a grid in the middle of the screen where you could work with both your projects and resources, which has been essentially revamped into this option where you click on it, it's going to provide you with a modal window for you to work with your projects or resources, as well as select the mode that you want to be in. So up here at the top, you would select the mode that you want to work with, either default, resource, or project. And then you'd work with it just like you worked with BPA Flatgrid in the past. So if I went on project, we would select the projects that we want to work with. The projects being brought in are based off of projects that are assigned allocation during this given time period defined over here on the left. And then based off of that, the resources would be automatically chosen based off the resources that are assigned to the projects. Just like before, you also have the ability to search for individual names or resources, as well as filtering capabilities on both the project and resource side. So if I want to filter on my projects, we can select the filter icon, and then the filtering would be done here on the left, and vice versa. If I wanted to filter on my resources, I select on the filter icon associated with the resources, and the filtering is done on the right. And the filtering is going to look very similar to what we saw before, where you go through here, find the attribute you want to filter off of. Maybe in this case, it's department. We go ahead and add that filter in, provide the criteria, and then you can continue to add additional information with it here. So if I want to have more than one filter, I could say I want to filter based off a department being set, as well as an efficiency not being set. We have my 18 resources. And one of the things that you can do now is you can also change the ordering of the filtering that is happening. So if you wanted to first filter on a efficiency in this case, you can move that by selecting on this kind of 8 dot icon over here to the left and change the positioning within here. Okay, and then if you want to go back to seeing the resources and projects, all you have to do is select on this X icon. And then if you're done selecting the projects and resources you want to work with, we can just go ahead and select out of here to do so. Okay, so once you have the information populated, it's going to look very similar to what we previously saw, just with an upgraded grid. Down below, you have your resources, your projects, tasks, and the allocations, just like we saw in the previous iteration. However, we have added a couple new things within here that will help you kind of work with the resources and group information together. And the first main piece I want to mention is this group by option. So now you have the ability to group your assignments that are being brought in, either by assignment attributes, resource attributes, or project attributes. So down below, we can see my assignment attributes, my resource attributes, as well as my project attributes. And let's say I wanted to sort this by my departments. We can go ahead, do that. And then we'd be able to see all the allocation associated to each one of the departments based off the information we've selected. So we can see that my resource and development on these two projects, I have 134 hours, 138 hours in February, and so on. And all the information is being broken up by those different departments. From there, you can drill in, and then you'd be able to see the named individuals and make the actual updates to the assignments within there. So the one thing I do want to mention with the grouping is you are limited to 3 groupings within here. So right now I have that 1 in place, but you would be able to add 2 additional groupings based off of any of your project resource or assignment attributes. Additionally, we do also now allow resources to rename the tasks within this view. So if there are resources or tasks that need to be renamed directly within here, instead of having to navigate back to project management, they can do so directly within the grid, just by selecting on the particular task and providing a new name. So one thing I do want to mention with this is it's not reassigning that resource to that particular task, it is renaming the task itself. So if I were to see this assignment with Jeremy and Caroline, they're both on Apollo Phase 14 on the same task. If I were to update this task name to maybe create communications plan 2, we would also see any of the other resources assigned to that task have that change as well. So it is renaming the underlying task entity. It's not reassigning the resources to a new or previously existing task. So I just want to make sure and mention that's kind of how the capability and the functionality is working. We've also added some additional options within here. So if we head up to the options area, we will see that we have some more options than we previously had, as well as some within here down below, we'll see 2 new ones, show named total, as well as show unallocated percent. And I'm just going to go ahead and enable both of those options. And the 2 that we will see here is first show total named resource with that show named total, and that's just showing you the overall amount of allocation assigned to your named individuals. So any of the resources that you have brought in here that have the is demand planning flag set to false would be essentially counted within here. And then we have a percentage of unallocated within here as well, which is going to be a calculation based off of 1, the amount of allocation hours being assigned to your demand planning resources. So any of your resources that have is demand planning set to true, divided by the overall allocation assigned. So any allocation assigned to your resources, regardless of if they're demand planning or not. So in this case, I see a bunch of 0%, meaning I don't have any demand planning resources in here, but that percentage would change based off of the demand planning resources within here. So for example, if I brought in all my my resources, and let's say there was an overall 1,000 hours being assigned, and then on my demand planning resources there was 100 hours, we'd expect that to show about 10% unallocated. So it's just going to be the amount of demand planning hours divided by the overall amount of hours being displayed. Okay. Additionally, we have improved upon the resource replace capabilities within this screen as well. So if you're familiar with the resource replace options within Tempus, we have 2 of them, one of them being within the resource or the bulk project allocation screen. So if you were to go to one of these resources and hit resource replace, and it looks like the option may have been disabled, but previously there was a resource replace option where when you select it, essentially you'd be able to do a full replacement of the resource, essentially 1-to-1. And then we also had a resource replace option on the single project allocation screen, which gave you a lot more flexibility where you can work with multiple resources as well as get some insight on the capacity and availability of your resources. So what we've done is we've added that capability directly within here as well. So if you open up here as long as the option is enabled, there is a Resource Replace Advanced option, which would essentially give you a screen very similar to the Resource Replace screen that you've seen in single project allocation, where you can work within here and do a resource replace just like you would in the single project allocation screen. And then the last updates that we have made within here, some updates around the resource requests, seeing some of the resource request information. So you will see these icons, and this was introduced in 7.1, but just want to reiterate that we do have the ability to see kind of the statuses of your resource requests directly within BPA Flatgrid. But we've also introduced the ability to, and I'm going to go over here and filter just on pending requests. We've also introduced the capability to take action upon your resource request directly within the resource or the BPA Flatgrid screen. So as long as you are the owner, you will have the ability to do a resource replace. So here, for example, if I go to Marie, since I'm the owner and the resource manager of Marie, what I will see are options to either A, approve the resource request from the screen, B, reject it, or you can actually just navigate to the resource request screen, which will just bring you to a new version or a new tab of Tempus directly on the resource request screen where you can take action like you've done before. So just a couple more options within here to work within Tempus and work within resource replace. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate back home. And the next area and big feature that we have added is if we go to admin settings here, we've added this fiscal period management. So for a long time, we've had a lot of our customers looking for capabilities to define their own fiscal periods. Their fiscal year may not line up with the calendar year, and they may need to do reporting based off of a particular fiscal year. We've introduced the capability for the administrators within Tempus to kind of define that fiscal period and be able to report and work with your information within here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up fiscal period management, and it's relatively straightforward to work with. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this fiscal year. And when you first navigate here, it's going to be blank. You'd have to set up your first fiscal period. But as time goes on, you need to define more. You can do so within the screen, and it's relatively straightforward. We hit create fiscal period. First, we have to provide an alias within here. And then down below, we can choose the start date, which is based off of the 1 day after the previous end date of your last fiscal period. And then you can choose when the end date of this fiscal period should be. So I'm going to have this one start in June of 2024, and I'm just going to have it end in May of 2025. From here, what you can then do is you'll have 12 different periods based off of fiscal months, where you can say what is the start date of the month or of that month, and then what is the end date. So you have full control over if you want to have that month be X amount of days or whatever the particular period for that month is at your organization. You have full control on how that should be set up. And what you can do is you can essentially say, well, my first month in the fiscal period should be just the entirety of June. Maybe the next one is entirely of July, and kind of go through and set up that period depending on how your organization has that set up. So you aren't restricted to doing the first and last of each month like I'm doing here, but you can set it up that way if needed. I'm going to go ahead and set it up like that. And then once you have those dates defined, you can choose what is the fiscal month representation of this first month. In this case, I'm going to set June, since this is aligned to June. And then you can provide aliases for both the month as well as quarter. So these aliases are what's going to be displayed when you're entering in this information through many of the different views. So within here, we have our month M1, 2, 3, 4, just to denote the different months for that fiscal year. But you could always rename them if you want. Maybe you wanted FY 2024 month 1, or you wanted to actually spell out the month. However you'd like to have that set up, you just provide that alias within here, as well as within quarter, so that you can then have this information represented when working with your data. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this, have this fiscal period created. And like we've already seen with within many of the views, we can go to any of my projects. Let's open up Astrophase 7 in this case, as well as I'll go to my allocations tab. You will have options to work with this information based off my fiscal month or fiscal quarter. So if I have my fiscal month, we can then see fiscal month 8 or M8 of 2022, M9 of 2022, or however that alias was set up. and then you'd have that information displayed within here and be able to fill it out based off of that fiscal representation, not the calendar year. So you'll see that throughout many of the different views within Tempus, as well as if you go to the reporting capabilities, the fiscal options are available within any of the report writers, excluding Portfolio Planner. So if you needed to report based off of fiscal year, not calendar year, within a pivot grid, we can go to dimensions here and you'll see your fiscal date, and you'd use those dimensions instead of the date dimensions that you may have used in the past. Okay, so I'm gonna head back to the home page, and the next screen that we'll be looking into is just some small updates on the resource management side, particularly on the net availability grid. And so if we navigate to resource management in 7.1, we did add the net availability grid within here. And we have added some additional capabilities within this screen. I think the biggest one being the ability to group your resources by attributes. So up here in the top right, we have this group by functionality now, where you can group by any of your resource attributes. So if we wanted to group by department and see what our net availability looked like at a department-wide level, we can go ahead and do so, and then we can see the heat maps associated to it, as well as drill down one more level to see the individual resources associated to those departments. Just like in the bulk project allocation Flatgrid screen, you are limited to just 3 groupings at this point in time. So you'll be able to group by 3 of your resource attributes within here, and then the grouping would essentially be disabled. So if I select on 3, it essentially removes the capability for me to select any more, but you can always deselect them and change those around at any point in time. And then additionally, we have added some more heat mapping capabilities. So in the previous version, you would only be able to overlay heat map within here, but we've now added 2 heat map capabilities within the net availability grid. The first one is going to be this config, and this is going to provide a heat map based off of the heat map thresholds that are defined within in general settings within Tempus. So based off of those particular settings, you can go ahead and apply this heat map, and it's going to display like you would see in the single project or bulk project allocation screens. However, we've also added the option to display at a simple level, which is going to be more of an out-of-the-box heat map, which is going to be based more so similarly around the heat map you may see within the cross-project allocation screen. So this is a very basic heat map. Essentially any resource that has availability during a particular time period is going to display as green. Any resource that is perfectly allocated so their net availability is 0 is going to be essentially no heat map. And then any resource that has a negative net availability or they're over allocated is going to display as red. So down below, you can see most of my resources are over allocated, but then we can go down here and we see some of my other resources do have some of the availability within here. So you can display that at this resource level like we're seeing, as well as the heat maps are displayed at a grouping level. And you can also choose to toggle the heat maps and how they're displayed when you are grouping by this information. So if you have the heat map displayed within here, if you want to disable it for the groups, but see it for individual resources, you can, or you can do vice versa if you want to only show at the aggregate level, but you do not want it to be displayed at an individual resource level. You can just work with those options to do so. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and navigate back one more screen. And then the last couple new features are going to be more so just very quick on the administrative side, so a lot within general settings as well as rule management. And we're just going to go through these very, very quickly. So if we navigate to general settings, you will see some additional tabs over here on the right. The first one being an alias tab. So we've decided to, as time gone on, we've added a lot of aliases for different data sets as well as different units of measure. And we've been providing these essentially within some of the different tabs within general settings. But since this has been continuously grow, we've decided to kind of allocate those all into the individual tab called alias, where you can manage all of the different aliases within Tempus. So those are going to be displayed here, as well as we've added an additional alias to the screen that was not in Tempus previously, which is this BPA default mode alias. Additionally, we've added this heat map tab, And this is just the heat map that is displayed throughout Tempus within the single project allocation screens, bulk project allocation screen, as well as net availability screen as now. And this is just going to essentially be the heat map that is displayed within there that was previously defined within this BPA tab. So it's no longer set within there. It's associated to its own tab within general settings. Okay, on the global tab, we made a couple updates. First is we've added an additional cost currency. So we added the United Arab Emirates dirham cost currency within here, as well as we've added fiscal month as well as fiscal quarter for modes of entry if you do want those to be displayed within Tempus. On the BPA side of things, we've added the ability to toggle if the resource replace and resource replace advanced options should be displayed. So if you do want those options to be able to do the no previous resource replace or the new resource replace advanced options, you do have to toggle those and enable those within general settings. And then lastly, in the miscellaneous tab, we have added options for single sign-on called a SAML configuration URL. And this is just an easy way for the user to provide a URL based off of the metadata information from the IDP provided in here to have this information automatically populate. So if you're new to Tempus or not so new, but you need to set up single sign-on, instead of having to provide these options and work with us, you could provide the URL here and it would automatically generate the application ID and port as well as certificate. And then additionally, just on lastly, in the role side of things, we have added some new roles to account for some of the new functionality. So we first covered Scribe within here. Scribe does have its own access in the global role. So if you want users to have access to Scribe, you will have to enable it within here. We've also added one new role surrounding existing functionality, which is the view and net availability grid. So that is now also being managed by the global role. So if users should have the capability to see that, this option should be enabled. And if they shouldn't, you'll want to make sure that it's disabled for your users. And then lastly, on the resource side of things, we've also added the manage fiscal calendar option, which is going to allow users to manage the configuration of that fiscal management or fiscal calendar management. So that's going to be that tile we went over within the general settings page or the admin settings page. And then lastly, we've added two new project roles. So in past iterations of Tempus, tasks and the ability to edit the name of tasks were more so grouped together based off the ability if they could allocate resources to that project. However, we've broken down that permission into two separate permissions within here. So now users can either A, have the ability to edit and create tasks within a project with this edit task option. And then they also have a new permission called delete tasks, which grants users the ability to delete tasks within a project. Okay, so with that being said, I rushed a little bit towards the end, but I wanted to make sure that we could go through all the new functionality within this particular release, but that covers the new functionality within version 7.2. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today and spending some time with us to go through the new functionality and see what the new capabilities are going to be in version 7.2. What I've done is I have provided the release notes as kind of the handouts area within here. So if you do need to review the release notes, let us know. If you have any questions on the new release, please feel free to reach out to your customer success manager, and they can absolutely provide you with more information and more assistance, or set up a kind of one-on-one session to walk through any pieces of functionality that you have more interest in. The version for 7.2 should be available to be have your instances upgraded very soon. So if you have any questions on that, again, I would recommend that you reach out to your customer success manager and they'll be able to provide you with any of this additional information. With that being said, I just want to thank everybody once more for joining and have a great rest of your day.